All right, welcome friends. Welcome to our Geek Club meeting number 7. And I trust you all had a good weekend and ready for an exciting week ahead. So tonight the agenda is closing techniques, and we will continue where we left off last week. But this week we will focus on objections and answers. And we will continue with our explanation of the food chain. And then tonight we have a guest, the Sadi family, and then just our forthcoming events. So just to recap again, we're busy with every person building his own house as a legacy. So you put your own name in there, and the legacy house is as good as its foundation, which lies in wisdom or the philosophy, and the walls of wellness and wealth. You can also say participating or being a practitioner, and ultimately the house will be differentiated by your vision for your family. Now, last week we started to speak about closing techniques, but we said, and we explained the whole process, but we said, as you present, just be aware of what we call rejection words, that you don't have words in your talk that can bring people shutters up. And these would be words like cost, price, list price, down payment, monthly payment, contract, buy, sold, sell. And we gave you some good alternative words. So go and revisit our talk last week. We then also talked about the closing process. And a few weeks ago, we said, as you do your presentation, be aware of the wedge of interest so that you can bring your people to an emotional readiness level as high as possible before you then ask your closing question. But be prepared for at least or anywhere between 0 and 5 cycles where you ask a closing question, but a person comes up with an objection. Then you answer the objection and you lead him to a new close, and then expect another objection and so forth. And then we also just defined last week that closing is the process that help people make decisions that are good for them. So you're not trying to sell anyone anything that they don't want, but you learn to understand the psychology behind the whole sales process. And then we said an objection is normally not bad. It's their way of saying, I am not sure, I don't fully understand how this is to my benefit. Reassure me that I'm making the right decision. And then your answer is normally in the form of another question, but it's so that you isolate the real reason behind the objection and deal with it before resuming the closing process. Then last week we talked about the different closes. We said there's the assumptive close. That's where you just assume they're ready to go on, and it can be as simple as, how do I spell your surname? A secondary question close is where you state the major closing question, but immediately follow it up with a minor closing question, because people find it easier to say yes to something of less significance than to be confronted by only one big decision. Then we talked about the alternative close. So you choose which alternatives you offer to them, but both alternatives are acceptable to you, and in your mind is like saying a yes from just 2 different angles. Then we talked about the negative close, and we say the negative close is your way of almost taking the opportunity away and showing that you're not sure whether they will qualify for this. And we just used the example of not everybody's ready to become the founding parent of his family dynasty. Then we talked about the Benjamin Franklin balance sheet close, and that's where if you are faced with a real big decision, you take a piece of paper, you draw 2 parts to it. On the first part, you say pros, and you then help the people to write down all the positives of the decision, and then cons on the other side. You then leave them up to the to put down what is negative about the decision, and then it's a simple matter of adding up the lines. How many lines have you entered under pro, and how many lines under con, and the one that outweigh the other helps you to decide. And then we talked about the puppy dog close, and that's where you give people the opportunity to try it out, test it. And in Geek, we pretty much follow that example by saying, go and watch the video. If you like it, dabble around with our free online course, until they're ready and they come to a decision. So in conclusion then, the whole talk last week was to get to the point of close so that they can now give us their first objection. And we said an objection is, I'm unsure, I need more information, or I still don't understand. But make sure that what they give you is an objection and not a condition. The condition is where there's no room for maneuver. It's like if a person says, I'm only interested in it if it's in blue. All right, well, then that's it. If you only have it in white or black, there's no need to go on any further. Or I don't want to talk to a man, I want to talk to a woman. Well, if you're a man, you can't change that fact. So I differentiate between a condition or an objection. But for the sake of tonight's talk, we'll assume we deal with objections. Now, the big secret weapon for yourself is to understand the power of questions. Now, the purpose of questions is that you can gain and maintain control of the situation. When I was still very, not trained on this process, I would find myself jabbering away and talk faster and faster to give more and more information. And it's almost like you're caught in the glare of a spotlight. And once I've learned how to ask questions, it's just such a sense of relief, because you shift the focus away from you. And although the client look at you, in his mind's eyes, in his own mind, busy painting himself in the picture to see how would I respond to that. So that's the purpose of the question. And another reason for a question is you don't want to talk the broad stuff. You want to narrow down to the specific needs of the client. So what is important for the client? And you can only identify that by being specific about your questions to the client. Then a further reason for questions is you don't say a whole lot of things and then right at the end just jump on them with a big decision to be made. You want to lead them on a journey where throughout the journey they give you lots of little yes, yes, yes. And when people constantly say yes, it's much easier for them to say the final yes. Then also remember, ultimately people make their decisions based on emotions, but they justify it by logic. So use emotions to your advantage, and through questions, direct whatever emotions they have towards the desired outcome. In the case of gig, you want to make them want to take up the challenge of becoming the founding parent of their family dynasty. Then a big tip, learn not to answer a question directly. Play it back to the audience or the person with another question. I remember way back, and that's probably why, to a large degree, I must thank Llewellyn, when we met in the army, and I asked him, is it selling? He then played it back to me and said, why do you like selling? And I said, no, I absolutely hate it. I'm more a kind of a manager and that kind of thing. And all he said to me, he said, then you will love it. And here I am, 38 years later, having gone through a whole journey with New Life and now Gig and all the other businesses. So the best technique that you can ever master is how to answer a question with a question. Now, how do you handle objections through the power of questions? Become comfortable with using words like is it, or isn't it, or would it, or wouldn't it. And just not to sound monotonous, learn how to use it in different parts in the sentence. So you can use it in the beginning of the sentence, like, would you agree that we can no longer wait for government to build our houses or build the economy or build a better future for our children? So you ask a question. Or you can put it in the middle. So somewhere else in your presentation, you paste it in the middle and say, if you come from a family line where you always found yourself in struggle and permanently broke, isn't it time that you break the cycle and become the founding parent of your family dynasty? Or at the end, for things to change, you will have to change or make a change. Would you agree? So can you see how subtly you constantly ask questions And every time you ask a question, subtly in the listener's mind, they respond to that question with a silent yes or no. And in most cases, it will be a yes. So when an objection comes up, the basic process of handling an objection is hear them out before you answer. So sometimes you're so nervous that you just jump in and not hearing exactly what they're asking or objecting to. Then check that you understand them correctly by feeding the objection back to them in the form of a question, like Llewellyn did with me. He said, do you like selling? Then, depending on the objection, start questioning their objection. Break it down to its smallest component, and then you can start answering each of the small components and clear it up for the client. And then as you go through this process, confirm the answer. In other words, get their agreement that your answer is solving their objection. And then only do you move to the next step in the selling sequence, which is probably the next close. And last week we did go through all the various closes. All right. So in all my 38 years of being in business, and today it's much easier with gig because almost 99 out of 100 people just love the concept and they say yes to it. But think of any product or service that you need to sell. In the end, it comes down to three objections. They say, let me think about it, or I don't have time, or I don't have money. Now, I'm just going to give you a few pointers on how to handle each of these objections. If they say, let me think about it, make sure that you have qualified them correctly at the start. So you don't want to just talk to any Tom, Dick, and Harry about your business. Get the right target market, and then at least you know you qualified them correctly. But then if they still say, let me think about it, it could be because they're not sure and you did not explain it clearly and all the benefits, and now they need more information. But understand they won't get the information on their own. They need it while you are in front of them. So ask them, so what is it that you don't understand? Is it? And then you just run through all the points of your presentation. Or it's not a true objection. They say, I want to think about it, but what they are too shy to tell you is, listen, I don't think I can afford it, or I don't have the money. So flush it out. What is really holding you back? Is it the time? And is it money? If they say, I don't have time, it's normally, and that's very true nowadays in our very busy lives, latch onto that emotional frustration of feeling overwhelmed and the lack of time, and get their agreement that every person has the same 24 hours a day, but we differ in how we choose to allocate our time, and we find or make time for what is important to us. So get into what is emotionally important to them. And then nowadays, I love what we're doing with the Geek and the Wealth Coach program. So I'm using the angle, if you could find a way to earn from 1 hour a day, 20 hours per month to meet all your needs, what would you like to do with the other 140 hours per month? And could you find that 1 hour per day? All right, then you can play with this and come up with some of your own questions. Then another popular one is, I don't have the money. And there you must be clear. Remember our negative words versus positive words. Explain to them the difference between cost and value. And so cost is obviously what is the asking price for an item, but what is your value out of that item? If we just take Geek membership for 60 Rand, you can even use ridiculous comparisons like 60 Rand for Geek membership that gives you the intellectual property to take your family from struggle to significance and become one of the founding parents like the Maponias or the Ruperts and Oppenheimers. Compare that to the price of a hamburger and Coke. And then also learn how to show the cost of not taking action. So insurance is very good at, although you think you can't afford it, when you start thinking what it will cost me if I crash my car or my house burned down, then the cost of not taking action is much higher than the cost of taking action. All right, and then Another example there is your gig membership of 60 versus the financial impact on your life if you're not leading your generation out of struggle to significance, and there's a whole generation lost there.